This is Wolfe. We're back to continue working on our project ship. Last time, let's just make sure the stream is actually started up. Sorry. Here we go. Of course, right as I'm about to continue the intro, I sneeze. So last time we built the engine section, defining the individual constituent components of the engines, giving in the redundancies for power, fuel storage, fuel production, but we also spent a bit of time working on the hangar bay. Now, the hangar bay is going to be one of the more complicated pieces to this whole design, because this is going to be where the majority of the support craft for this ship will be stored. So we'll have the ability to launch them from this compartment here, which can be fully sealed off and depressurized. This was stuff that we set up last time. And that depressurized air will then get, the air sucked out of there, wow, if I could talk, will then get stored in these tanks. So no matter what, you're not losing air when you use these rooms. Also, there's going to be depressurization capability for the main room, which has this storage capacity here, and is sufficiently locked off. Now, it can be pressurized using the ship's oxygen supply with these two vents, but only these two vents, and they'll be set up in such a way that they can be turned on and off as they need to be. For the most part, it's going to be self-sufficient. This will just help stabilize everything from the tanks in here. Now, the large door that's going to go down in here, and I think I'm actually going to do two of them, are going to be the drop doors. They're going to be 2-layer thick of the blast doors, mostly to prevent catastrophic failure, but for the moment I'm not going to do anything with those. This ship may look relatively plain for the moment, and we do have a little bit of the sweep in the wings and the aspects built into them that's here, but this is just meant to be structural, just meant to guide us as we move forward. With that said, today we're going to continue finishing off the hangar space here, and we're going to build the command and control spaces and primary crew quarters of the ship. Now, the bow is going to contain most of the special operations capabilities of the ship, and that is going to be its whole own separate host of systems. So with that said, we're just going to continue working on here in the hangar bay. Now, I would like to be able to just, like, for example, seal this portion off and whatnot. Not necessarily doable at this time. Yeah, that's cargo access and it will be connected, but I need to leave this open so I can provide a proper access point for the rest of the cargo network. Which, if you saw the last video, or the last time I showed this, it ends right here at a sorter. So no matter what, we're going to have to find another way of connecting up cargo. And my original plan was actually to use this junction here as one of the main attachment and connection points, and then we could also do the same and have one come off of, say, here. Give redundancy. As this is primarily a combat ship, redundancy factors into every aspect of its design. There's fuel storage and primary power in the engineering room, which is oddly large. Don't worry about it, that's mostly for decoration purposes. It is heavily armored, and this is just the interior armor. And not even the exterior armor, which is going to have even more. But it's also going to be embedded deep inside the main core of the ship. So there's even going to be sections of the ship that stick out over here that will fairly effectively enclose this area. So while it is relatively large, it is also extremely well secured. And if we go down here, we can see that even though this looks like it's the finished hull design, it's not. There's going to be so many more things that get put in this area to ensure the security and survivability of the engineering section. Now, the gyroscopes that are installed, these add a lot of weight. With that said, that means that the rest of the main superstructure of the ship is going to have to very carefully moderate its weight. Yes, we have a total of, what is that, 14 forward-facing thrusters, which tie into the rest of the maneuvering system, but there's no forward-facing thrusters yet. That's okay. When we start working on those, they're going to get embedded in probably a cavity here, or in the bow. That's a part of the design here, is that I wanted to make sure that we're able to maximize the usefulness of the space, And in order to do that, I have to actually acknowledge and accept what the primary functions of the ship are going to be. Since it's primarily going to be a carrier and combat ship, I need to account for that. That said, let's run a line of blocks off of here down to about, let's do here. Okay? And then we'll drag them across and connect them on the side here. This is going to define the rest of the hangar space. So when you have your ship, this is how much room you have to work with when maneuvering around in here. It may not seem like much, but it is actually fairly substantial. I could do a dome to the roof. It all depends on what I design for the upper portions. As the upper portions are going to be command and control oriented, they're also going to need extra reinforcement between them and the primary vulnerability of the ship, which is the hangar bay. So I'm going to add probably another whole row of blocks along here that will be included in the pressure hull. Now, last time I discussed the concept of the hull for this thing is it's going to have a pressure hull on the interior, and it's going to have an exterior hull, with an area like this, for example, being an access point that you can walk through a pressurized space to access portions of the ship. Even if the ship is damaged on the outer hull, the pressure hull should remain intact. Now, that is unfortunately brought into question in the shape of the hangar, or in the form of the hangar bay here, in that the hangar bay is both the outer hull and the pressure hull in places. So you kind of have to double up. That's what I'm doing right now. I think the easiest way, however, to go from here would be to work on designing what this portion is going to look like. And I already have a bit of an idea in mind for what we can do for that. I'm going to add a reinforcing component to about there. I want it to roughly line up with here, so let's bring it over to here. And then we're just going to draw this back to about here, one block away from that ion thruster. The ion thrusters, these thrusters are recessed. They will be behind not only the primary hull, but also the structural supports within the hull. So there's a certain amount of, kind of gotta be careful here. I'm going to just drag that across. Now, the heavy armor here is protecting systems on the inside. It's adding as like a reinforcing plate onto those secondary systems. As I start working more and more on the outer hull, I will be adding in more of these types of setups. Now, with that said, this has also given us an area in which we can start to slope back. And I think should do it here. I think this is as perfect an opportunity to start showing how you can start sloping back certain elements within the hull. So I'm just going to bring this up a couple blocks, in order to give you an idea of what this can look like. This is all solid armor. So that means that the sections that are on top of this will be relatively well protected. Even if this is only acting in the form of a structural component, they'll still be protected. But this sloping armor will allow for, between the primary outer hull, which will be heavily armored, and the inner hull, a fair bit of structural reinforcement. I haven't even gotten into block deformations yet, which factor into the design. But since I've mentioned that there's an outer hull, and the... Come on. Sometimes the controls drive me nuts with this thing. Okay. It's always changing. I'm going to drag this back to about here. Okay, leave that one extra block to assist with blending in those. From here, I'm going to take a regular full block back enough that I'll be able to run it along the side here where the thrusters are and have these be integrated in. So we're going to go back to here, and since we're now approaching the edge of the wing, by adding in the secondary superstructure, we're now going to have to start giving ourselves a little bit more discretionary use of armor. Why do I say that? The most the simplest way of explaining it is that I have to account for the fact that there's two edges to blend in here. We've got the edge along here, which is going to have its own complications, and that is such a cool eclipse with that asteroid down there. But also I'm going to have to blend in what's going to eventually be here on the thrusters. So to an extent, we will have just that extra little bit of difficulty to account for. That said, by drawing a lineup of blocks like so, I can now create the final edge, which for this I'm going to make it a little bit more sloped. And there we go. Oops. Did I accidentally place a block over here? Nope. So now we've got the superstructure of the upper portion. And now you're starting to see just how complicated and how many layers can go into this kind of design process. With that said, I'm going to leave the back end here with the engineering section almost completely exposed, and I'm just going to continue working on forming a sort of dome over this area. Now, as you've seen me use some of these blocks already, don't mind showing you what this next particular stage will look like. Just go along here, and then here's where things get a little tricky, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. We're going to replicate exactly what we did on that side to a point, and then we're going to block off this section and make sure you're looking in the right face, otherwise you place the block in a weird place. And then we're going to also slope this back using a different set of blocks, but I don't have those in my action bar right now, so let's go ahead and add those in, and it's these suckers. So we're going to... Is it not those? You know what? I was looking right at them. It's light armor slope. Okay. There we go. This is how we'll blend all this in. Now, the light armor slope has a couple of variants to it, including the half slope block, which is very useful in other aspects of the build here. Now, this area is all going to get left to the blending and all this, but right now I'm just going to start building up the dome here. So that's what number 3 will be for. Come on. Not too far. Okay. With these, we can place them along here. Here's the little end tip piece. That then anchors. Now, this is going to be a weird corner. It's something you run into. Yeah, there's ways of blending and working around it. I just don't want to take the time right now. Mostly because I don't know if this is going to actually be visible from the outside yet. And that's an important caveat to remember, is that if you're building something, it doesn't have to look good from every single conceivable angle. Just build it to be functional. Now, here is again another area where things are going to look a little awkward. And I'm just simply going to place that on top like so, and it will replicate the effect over. So, got this. This one, and then brace that over, and finish that off by creating that corner there. It looks awkward, but also adds a little bit of complexity to the design. Because now we have this section here that looks like it's popped out, it looks like it's a little more reinforced. I might even go ahead and delete that block in the back there and just make it a full block. So, see, yeah, that looks better. See, now this looks like an intentional design element. I'm going to move this and make that a solid block as well. And this is blending at its best, actually, because this allows you to take complicated shapes and turn them into much simpler shapes. Just takes a little time. Now, with that said, we've got all of this anchored up to this point. So let's go ahead and then drag across on here. which is just going to be a simple line of blocks to this point, and it's going to have another line going this way. And let's go ahead and yoink that last one, because the different block that I want to put in that spot. Yeah, let's do that. Then this will allow me to do that. Put a full block here. And there we go. We've blended these two different angled layers together. And I'm just simply going to go back and forth and just continue this process along the side here, creating a sort of zigzagging alternating pattern. On the inside, however, I'm also going to add in an inverted slope block. Because this is going to be so much of a portion of the end final design, I need to make sure that I put in the extra effort needed to reinforce it. Well, that's what these blocks are for. These blocks in here provide just that little bit of extra reinforcement for the design. Now, this is going to be an awkward one, so I'm going to have to play around with that, but that's okay. It's part of the process. I'm going to drag that over, and then I'm going to connect these. Putting a full block there. A slope here. And then just going to continue this stair-step pattern, bringing that up. Come on. That's the one I need. Now, here's the first time I'm going to run into a place where I need to replicate the flat shape. That's okay. This is all part of the pressure hull. So as long as I have attachments on the side of it, it can look as plain as it wants to be. Back here, I do know that this section will be exposed. This is part of the outer hull. So that's kind of why I put so much effort into blending it like this, and just went back and forth on what I was originally going to do. So let's finish off this upper portion here. And I'm just going to immediately take this, in the wrong block, take this from there into that block, and drag it across. And as you can see, it's already creating a little bit of a slope difference within the overall look. And that reset. This is one of the blocks that no matter what orientation you put it in, while most of them will reset, it for some reason, they won't reset. That one does. Mildly annoying, to be perfectly honest. Let's, come on, there we go, that's the right one. There we go. So, this is actually starting to come together quite a bit. Whoa. And I'm slipping and sliding here. Now, I haven't even put any thought into where I'm going to put things like the bridge, the CIC. I do know that in this particular space right here is going to be the flight control operations room, right in front of engineering. Probably on the same deck as well, but I'm not quite sure where it'll go from there. So, with that said, let's close all this off in the pressure hull, except for the hallway that's going to be along here. So to do that, I'm going to run a line of blocks along here, anchor that, double it up, and as this is the portion that will be inside the pressure hull, I need to make sure that, as this area is intentionally going to be inside the pressure hull, I need to make sure that I properly isolate it from the rest of the design. Yeah, it's going to be a 1 meter high, or 1 block high. Actually, no, I should probably do that. One there, and then do there. A little extra structural reinforcement. Now, this hallway is going to be extremely bland and boring and stuff. That's fine. It's meant to be just a passageway to connect two areas. So I could put that there. And Honestly, since it's also providing access to this area, I'm likely just going to close those off and put a door here. So they can have access to this space. Probably would put the door here, actually. There. Now we can have the door in here, there's inventory access, and you can access this area with your jetpack. So let's turn on my lights first. Actually, no, I'll do an airlock door here, and I might do an airlock at the end there. So, but you see, this hallway is very small, very bland, not very interesting at all. That's okay. It's meant to be just a pressure. I mean, it's meant to maintain just pressure, so that way you can then access the hangar bay here. So, and there will be other catwalks and stuff put in, so. That said, you can just imagine technicians and crew members running down this hallway. My jetpack's off. Running down this hallway trying to get to their stations during an emergency situation. So, with that said though, I'm going to fill in this whole area in order to create kind of the roof and floor of the different sections here. So let's drag this over. So, and now this is unfortunately adding quite a bit of weight to the design. So in order to maintain or manage that weight, I'm going to keep spaces like this relatively open and exposed. So there will be these cavities throughout the whole thing where you could put in secret passageways, where you could put in secondary systems. Believe it or not, that is one of the best ways of creating automated functions within the game. So just take a little bit of time and go with it. So with that said, I do like the look of these thrusters, so I might leave this section here as its own little drop-down space and crew access. But I'm going to draw a line of blocks probably here. Definitely there. And to replicate this over here. Mostly because I'm placing random blocks in random places. Mostly because I'm wanting to keep this all structural. Okay? So that way if there are hits to this area, it's not going to cause progressive or catastrophic problems later down the line if things start breaking loose. If the whole deck plating is reinforced like this, it would be okay. Should be pretty fine. Now we've got this whole section here that runs directly across the roof. This is where we're going to have to, or directly above the roof. I could remove this, but there's not a whole lot there. It's literally just going to be a gaping hole. I want this to be somewhat protected too, so I'm just going to run a line of conveyors down here. To do that first, I need conveyors in my hotbar though. Looking right at them. I had them on my hotbar. So, and I could do conveyor junctions, but I'm not. I'm only going to stick to tubes for this portion. Oh, actually, that needs to be straight anyway, so. And this is then going to get encased inside an armor sheath. So, we also had, as I mentioned before, the option to create inventory access points from here. That's going to be done now. I don't think I need a junction there, but I do need a tube, curved tube. Angle it forward, please. There we go. The tubes are annoying. They don't want to spin where you want them to spin half the time. So, this is going to allow for, easier access to this area. Now, conveyors do add a little bit of kind of an input lag to the game, but that's okay for the time being. It's in this area that I think I'm going to run the conveyor, though, so I might as well remove this. And here. I'm going to drag it up and bring it forward over here. So as long as we have the 3 conveyor lines running forward, the ship can conceivably take damage to a good chunk of it and still not lose conveyor functions. So, and then all this can then be hidden behind bulkheads in what will be the pressure hull. So, and with that, I can then drag this forward to about here. I think I'll probably leave that as that, but now since I've enclosed a good portion of the hangar bay, it's probably a good time now for me to enclose the rest of it. So, yeah, I was originally going to just try and leave it as open as possible, just not get constrained with things, but I think I'm in a good place with that now. Here. So. And like that, we now have that mostly enclosed in. We have the area where the conveyors are going to be accessible, but I think I'm going to, for this section, have a more complicated area, so I'm actually going to elevate this up a bit here. And it's okay if this is exposed, because this is all going to be in areas that will be maintained in other ways. I think, however, just to be on the safe side, though, I'm going to add in conveyor junctions here. And here. To allow for pressurization. Because you don't want to have too many points in which something can penetrate through. I think one more should do it here. And we're going to drag this forward. There we go. And then I'm going to incorporate a sloped piece to allow for buckling in the event of combat. That buckle, so when I say that I'm allowing for buckling, what I mean is that I'm allowing for the blocks to deform in the event of an impact in the area. It's relatively important to include that in your design. Otherwise, what will happen, and it will surprise you, is you'll have a ship, you're taking damage, and you're just taking damage in the armor. But the armor will change shape and deform, and it'll go in and it will cut your conveyor line. Well, what I'm doing right here is it's trying to make it so that way it will deform within the hitbox that it already has, which is the area, if I move too much, it's going to be changed, but it's in the area that's outlined in red. It will deform inside that space and just outside of it, but if there's a cavity, it will initially deform, or if the shape is not a full block, it will initially try to deform into just this empty space within the block. And that is very useful in combat, very useful to know and have planned for our combat ship. That said, I'm just going to brace this once more along here. So, and I can pretty this up later, but now you see I've got this raised portion in here. It doesn't look that great. We can fix that. So, let's change that out for this one. And then we can place this along here, smoothing it out. Now, as the conveyor is passing through this space, I do kind of want to leave it open like that. But since the top of it will end up being pressurized, I'm not too worried. I think, though, just to be on the safe side, I'll run an extra line of angled blocks along here. Just to be on the safe side. Add the extra little bit of pressurization capabilities, just in case something gets broken and depressurization does end up occurring. With that, I'm just going to draw a line of blocks back and forth here a few times. And That didn't replicate like I wanted it to. Do what I wanted it to do. No, it didn't do it at all. It was mildly frustrating. And actually, I think I'll replace this with slope blocks. See, now I'm getting into the whole design aspect of all this and trying to make it look pretty. So yeah, make it nice and sloped in here. So, and this is the main portion of the hangar. So you got the extra little bit of space. We can have equipment hanging from the roof. Inventory access is taken care of. Yeah. Then you got the storage areas on the side here where you can store the ships between missions. Alright, hangar's now blocked off. I could angle and greeble the corners and stuff. I might do that if I start getting seriously concerned about weight. I'm not there yet. Yeah, I'm not quite there yet. Let's remove that, but let's leave that corner in there as an attachment point. And let's continue dragging the conveyor forward. I'm going to include a full conveyor junction here, because it will be beneficial to have one there. And then I'm going to... Come on, there we go. Just do the whole moving this thing around a couple of times so I get into the right position. Drag it forward to about here. Conveyor junction. And draw it down. Now that's all connected up. That's not a conveyor junction. That's a conveyor junction. Okay. Now that's all connected up to the inventory on that side, and we can easily connect inventory up from here. So we're good to go in terms of inventory. Now all of this looks absolutely horrendous when you're considering that this is meant to be a floor. Let's go ahead and fix that. Wrong button. I'd mentioned a half slab before. Well, that's it. That's this right here. So let's go ahead and use this as our initial floor. But you got to remember that just like in Minecraft slabs, you can't place things directly on top of it since the attachment points are on the sides and the bottom. So that is something to actually have to keep in mind when designing this. If I build a floor out of this block in its current orientation right now, it's going to be a pain to place anything on it. It's all going to look weird, but it does have its uses. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it across in its half slab form like this, across the entire floor, and then draw it across, connecting up. And this is now the floor. The reason being is this also allows that just one extra little bit of protection between the pressurized sections for the crew and the hangar bay. Now, granted, a half slab of, or half block, I should say, of light armor is very paltry protection, but it's something. Okay? Now, we've just simply added on a bunch of armor. We haven't worked on any systems or anything particularly special for this, but that's fine. Okay? I need to make sure and make this abundantly clear. Adding in all the extra functional systems and everything isn't always a priority when you're trying to get something in a functional place. Now, that said, this whole plate here isn't very well anchored, so that's something I do need to do. Probably a good idea to just simply do that. Yeah. And that'll help anchor it. But it's got plenty of attachment points all around. Maybe I'll add in just a couple extra. And yeah. So, on a ship like this, let's review what this ship is supposed to be. This is a strategic asset. Now, when talking about military ships, strategic assets are things such as aircraft carriers. They are, in the Star Wars universe, for example, the Executor class Super Star Destroyer is a strategic asset. These are larger ships where you typically have a fleet admiral or a high-ranking officer in command of a large group. Alright? And that is what this ship is going to be. It's the asset that the fleet admiral is aboard, directing operations across a large area. So I need to make sure that not only will this CIC I'm about to build be, one, have plenty of functionality to it, but two, is also positioned in an area that will allow the greatest capability of operating as it's supposed to in this role. And to do that, I'm going to place it closer towards the bow of the ship. So it's actually going to go directly above this portion here, because that will mean it's separated from the engines by quite a distance, and isn't necessarily an area where people would think to target, unless they're going directly for the command center, but think to target to try and cripple the ship. With that said, there is going to be a secondary command and control area underneath here within flight operations. So there will be two places where the ship can be controlled from. With that said, let's go ahead and start working on this section, which is actually going to jut out above here. I want it to be anchored in at this point, which is where cargo gets hooked in. And we're going to, is one of the points where cargo gets hooked in. There's more than one. And we're probably going to go up a little bit. So this is just going to look super awkward initially. But trust me, there's a method to the madness of the plan here. So, that said, we now have a conveyor here. Oops. Conveyor here. And on this, we're going to place our vent. This is a vent in the back of the command center that pressurizes it. So now we have a back wall. Let's build that wall out just a bit and build it up. So this looks super ugly right now, and I fully acknowledge that this is bad design. But it's meant to just be a starting point. We're going to draw. Why does it not like that? There we go. We're going to draw some blocks forward, like that, to give us the ability for a panorama. I'm actually going to remove this line up here, because I kind of want to have a glass dome with a armored key plate over the top of it that will be able to slide into place. So let's build this out like so, and build this forward. So as I start adding in more layers and more functionality here, I'm adding more space in here to work with. Now, to control this ship, and coincidentally to keep all the thrusters functional, you need a control seat. All right, let's go ahead and place this here. It's automatically facing the wrong way, so let's rotate it around so it's facing the right way. This is where the main pilot will sit. I don't want him up against the front here. I could do that, and I could easily blend everything in there, but I want to put a little bit of distance in there so I can put things in front of him. Okay? Flanking him and a little bit towards the back are going to be two more control seats for weapons control consoles. And those are going to be arranged in kind of bullpen-like arrangements. So you can have multiple officers operating them like so. I think 4 weapons control stations is plenty. I don't really need anything more than that. And I can go in here and program this one to be the primary. So let's go up to it, press K, control panel, and come on. Control panel. You're just wanting me to... control panel. This can control thrusters and is the main cockpit. Okay? Controls the gyros, inertial dampeners. The main thing is the main cockpit. If I go over here, that means that these are not the main cockpit. In fact, all it can do is show the horizon. So it means if somebody hops into this seed or this one, they will not interfere with the controls. The main cockpit's the only thing that can do that. With that said, the pilot takes direction from the Fleet Admiral. The weapons officers take direction from the Fleet Admiral. Where does the Fleet Admiral go? Well, Fleet Admiral... I thought I had grabbed it. Fleet Admiral isn't actually paying attention to what is happening on each of those individual consoles. The Fleet Admiral should be, and where did the holotable go? No, it's not that one. Oh. Why did I forget what that thing was called? Okay, so it's not a cockpit block, it's... There it is. That's the console block. Gotta love these names. Console block will go right there. That has a projection on it that is projecting relevant information for the battle. And I'm also going to put another pair of them in the back here and have some secondary control consoles along them. I want the access point for this ship, however, to be right through this space. So I'm going to put an airlock in there. But if I break those blocks, this thing detaches from the whole grid, so I can't do that just yet. I could also put it here, but I feel that's going to be too far out, so... Well, actually... It shouldn't. I'm not going to take that risk. I'm going to drag a line of blocks across like so, and then punch out these two, and that's where the doors will go. So I'm just going to do a simple door for this design. Something simple, something you would expect to find inside a command ship, which is just a basic little door like that. Yeah, I could have put it offset a little bit. I could have two in here. I'm not sure yet. I might do two. But, yeah. Now, it's under these blocks right here that we also have a number of useful secondary things that can go on a bridge. And it's with that in mind that I'm going to play around with the decorative ones here. Because this just kind of fleshes out the bridge a little bit, makes it seem a little bit more functional, I guess is the word I'm trying to reach for here, but kind of failing at. And yeah, these are decorative. They don't have much of a function in here, but they also add the whole feel of the room. Okay? They will also allow me to kind of set the nature of what this ship is to an outsider, which is this ship has a lot of secondary functions built into it, and that these are decorative, but they're also supposed to be like producing fruit, food, air, things like that. I think I'll do another one here, and then I'm done with that block. So with all that, there was a secondary purpose to this. These sides are attachment points, but not super useful, but they do add just an extra little bit of structure. With that in mind, I'm going to finish out and flesh out this space, and then use these to anchor in. Actually, I'm probably going to do that to make more sense. There we go. That makes a little bit more sense, and I think I'll do that. That's one of the reasons I didn't want to put that console so far forward, is on this edge is going to be a fairly small amount of armor. But it is going to be an attachment point. So I know that somewhere in here, I don't know which one has it, there is this cool little, I think it's this one that has the cool little angled half slab. That's the sloped corner. Haha, half corner block. You can use this like so. Create that nice little ledge there, but also use the half block here to add in just that extra little bit of, come on, I know it's in here, there we go, of armor that can be anchored onto with something such as a window. Which means I'm going to have to remove that, but, oh, actually, I can leave that in to a point. Because I have the attachment points along here, just means I need to have a little bit of some clever working with. I'm going to do heavy armor panels for this part, just because it's the bridge. I'm going to do heavy. I could have done the half panel. I didn't even realize that. Ooh, it has angled panels too. I'm not very familiar with all the stuff that was included in this, so that's cool to know. It's got a quarter panel, half panel. Definitely something I will play with later. But in the meantime, I'm going to be placing the windows. So we've got the glass blocks, window blocks, what do they call them? Window blocks. Along here. I'm likely going to do the half windows initially, and then along the top I'll do the flat windows and all the various slants with them, which I believe is this block. So, but the reason why is that the half windows go very well with that block. Okay? Because it just fits. It makes sense to have that, and you don't really want to have the outside of it showing too much. So I think I'm going to do that one there, and then I might do these up elsewhere, but for the moment that's all that I'm going to do with those. Now I understand there is a lip here in how things are sticking out. That's okay. That's the attachment point this is all anchoring to in a couple different places. That said, let's get our window placed. Yep, that's the tinted side facing out. And we're going to do something similar, come on, here with the slope. Now that's the wrong way. There we go. And I'm going to go up one more. Then along here, along here, I'm going to place the slopes in this spot. And this is now enclosing the bridge in kind of a dome. That said, along this edge is where the next block that I'm going to use comes into play. It's the 1x1 base. I do not believe I grabbed the 1x1 face. Did we grab the wrong? Yep, I didn't. I grabbed the wrong one. Okay. And just going to angle them across like so. This side is going to be a little bit tricky to make that work, but that's okay. Now, you can use the inverted face to fill in the next slot. Okay, just need to place it along here. So, this area is going to be a little tricky. I may need to just simply abandon that project. So, let's go back to number 5. And there we go. Which means over the front here is also going to have to be an interesting design, but that's fine. Not that one, it's the regular one. I guess there, please. And along this edge is just going to be the slopes. So now, working with windows is tricky. As you can see from what just happened on there, I deleted 2 blocks without, or deleted 1 block and placed another one without meaning to. You have to make sure you're on the hitbox of exactly the block you want to be working on. Otherwise, things happen. I think I'll do that, and in this space we'll go number 7. There we go. And this side, for whatever reason, it didn't place the blocks. That's okay. Let's go back to number 5. Rotate that in the proper position. There we go. And now we've got a glass dome started. for the ship's command center. And if I turn my jetpack off, you'll see that now the ship's commander the commander of the group, the battle group, whatever this ship is assigned for, has the ability to have basically a panoramic view of the front of the ship. So he can be standing right here issuing commands at the helm, issuing orders as they assault that asteroid, for example. You could be over here watching a battle between several fighters and drones. There's lots of things that the commander can be doing now. That said, let's go ahead and close this off. And there. Now this should fully pressurize. Even though it looks like there's these little gaps in there, it should fully pressurize. But for a flat surface like this on the inside, I'm going to go to the inverted one and double it up. So for all the flat surfaces that are just regular flat surfaces, they're going to get doubled up. Why? It's mostly me just trying to make sure that there's at least one additional layer of reinforcement. So, and then we can also do that then to fill in this whole space here. Having a inset window. Like so. Won't be able to go there, but that's fine. And we do this. And now we've created a great big old mass of glass with a commander inside. So let's finish these corners off. Now there's already a block in there, so we're going to have to place these corner pieces directly on top. There we go. Directly on top of... Come on. Oh, it's the wrong way. Directly on top and anchored like so. So, we should be good to go with that. Since most of these blocks are on the inside, we're then going to run another layer of the regular glass face. That's the wrong one. Just the flat one along the surface here, doubling it up. Why? It's adding in that extra level of reinforcement that a combat ship should have. Yeah, it's glass. It's not going to take much of a hit to punch through it. Oops. Not going to take much of a hit to punch through it, but now it's 2 layers thick. It'll take twice as much. Oh, it's pressurized in here. It's going to take twice as much extra impact, and if you're looking at it from inside, this looks much more realistic in the reinforced windows appearance. So, and if something does come by, it's not going to immediately, they're not going to immediately be able to destroy the bridge or the command center with a hit or 2. So, command center could probably actually weather multiple hits. So just imagine you're in here, a fighter is coming up, it strafes you, the glass took the hits, you're good, and then your drones come in and take care of the rest of it. So, all right, this is initially the command center. Now there is going to be another aspect to this, and I believe I mentioned it already, in the form of a armored plate that goes over the top of it. There's a couple different terms for that kind of plating, but in this particular instance, I'm just going to call it a scarab design, or call it a scarab plate. I'm not totally sold on this part right here, but that's okay. A scarab plate is like a dedicated piece of armor that can move around to cover something. It's like the shell of a beetle. So, with that, we now have the command center section. We have a deck here, and it's on a deck above, which means we need to draw this line of blocks. Come on, full block. Back a fair distance. I would say draw it back to here is probably the best point. And draw up. And now you're starting to get to see just the angle of the way the center line, the main superstructure is going to look like. I could do something kind of like a Star Destroyer, but as everyone knows, that just means that it's easier to target the bridge of a Star Destroyer. So in this instance, everything's going to seem a little bit more compact in here. You can have the flight crew in that control center. You can have another control center embedded down below. There's just a lot of extra details that can go into it. So with that said, I think the next step for us is actually kind of to define the shape of this portion of the superstructure, which we've already done a little bit of it already with that. By creating that particular section of glass. So I'm going to draw a line of blocks back to about one before this one, and then do the same thing heading forward, but one more inset. And I'll probably do the same thing along here as well. Don't know. Let's see what this looks like. Because right now I'm just playing around with it. Doesn't look very appealing, but there will be more details added on over the top of this. Yeah, it's not very appealing at all. But as it's meant to be the center line on the interior of a portion of the ship, I think I can blend it in once I start working on the rest of the pressure hull. So with that said, because that window's right here, I kind of am stuck. Kind of. I'm going to make a change. I just depressurized the whole thing. Let's go ahead and remove this up to that block. And drag this down along so. There we go. That smooths it out quite a bit. I love this block. It makes it so much easier than the previous way. It's convex. There's a couple different places I could use that over here too. Like here, for example. Oh yeah. I should have used this from the get-go. Okay, that looks so much better. I completely forgot they'd added in these new blocks. So, in case you couldn't tell, I haven't really played a whole lot in the last couple of years, so that's fine. So, we have our command center here. We have oxygen, but there's no oxygen supply for them to use. I think that would suggest the next course of action is actually to remove this right here and replace it with an oxygen tank. That provides them with a full supply of oxygen for that area, and I think I'll also run a line of batteries along the front. Just a few. Just intended to give them an access to power, no matter what happens. Most likely those batteries will be constantly charged, but then powered down, not involving anything else, unless the ship is in an emergency situation. Now you'll notice there's one thing I have not added in here into the bridge yet, and that's lights. Believe it or not, lights are one of the final things you ever do to a build. So there's plenty of space in here to add lights in places such as this corner. If I were actually really looking to add in lights though, the first place that I would add in lights is along here, and then I would also add them in a corner here facing outward. Maybe along this side facing outward too, but you always want the lights to be one of the last things you put in there, because otherwise it just throws things off with you having to constantly go in and program them. You place the lights for the section that you want to have controlled or be under a certain control interface, and then you put just those lights in, you save them in a group, and then you remove it from the rest of the console. Otherwise it gets really tricky trying to get everything all to line up. So, with that said, we've now sealed off the hangar bay, we've built up the, well, not sealed off, but we've enclosed the roof portion of the hangar bay. Did a little bit of greebling in here. I think I'll leave that, because it adds an aesthetic look into here to the hangar bay. We've got the storage and storage places here. We've got the launch. I haven't decided what I'm going to do down in this area, but most likely it will be cargo. That'll be the main cargo supply for the ship, which there's plenty of ways for me to access the conveyor network from there. That's not difficult. But I have plenty of more ideas that I can go into this one, but right now I'm kind of starting to run out of things to talk about with it. Space Engineers does have its tedious aspects, and unfortunately I'm starting to run into one of them. And that it just starts taking so much time to place the blocks. Talking is kind of distracting away from that, but that's okay. I'll leave that there. This is coming along. Probably will take another 4 or 5 sessions to get it to the point where it's ready for me to cut the tether, which the tether, by the way, for those that don't remember, is right here. Cut this tether and be able to start flying around with it. Flight tests will be their own separate stream. You may also know I have not put a jump drive in this. So, the reason for that is I want the jump drives to be kind of nestled away in this space. I haven't quite figured out a way that I could put them in there until I get everything anchored up for the control and passageways that the crew will operate in. So that's a little ways away. Definitely something that I'm going to have on my list. But in the meantime, I think I'm just going to keep adding in... No, not that one. Not that one. Ugh. Let's do this one. Reason being is I want to drag this slope down a bit, and I don't want the 45-degree angle. I want actually this angle to drag it down. You don't want super expansive rooms. Well, you could. There's nothing saying they're a bad idea, but you don't want super expansive rooms inside areas of a ship meant to be less functional than, say, the engine room or the hangar bay. Right now, the largest room in this ship is the hangar bay, followed by the engine room. And that's a vulnerability. So, the larger your rooms are, the more systems that can be accessed from them, if a hostile ship were able to get inside. So, I'm going to drag this down to make the rooms a little bit smaller, and to allow for a greater level of protection on the interior. Now, I haven't even begun to talk about the weapons grid for this thing. One reason for that is a weapons grid of a ship this size is going to be complicated. My preference for a ship like this is for the weapons grid to have 3 or 4 individual major arrays that are targetable by a controlled block. So you could have, say, a forward heavy weapons array that a single turret controls, targets everything with it, and then when it fires, all turrets fire on that same target. Or I could have arrays where you set them up with a certain sequence, and they fire a continuous spread or bursts of spreads or something in the general specific direction. So what I'll probably do with this is I'll have a port weapons grid, a starboard weapons grid, and a forward weapons grid. Then there will be secondary point defense systems based all around it, but those will be the primary grids. And with a ship this size, and this is a big ship by the way, having those grids set up before I get the hull finalized is going to make finishing this thing really, really hard. So the weapons grid is going to be one of the last things I do before I go in and finish decorating all the interior. So, but if you ever find yourself building a ship like this in Space Engineers, one of the important things to remember is that it takes time. It's not going to be done in a day. It's not going to be done in a week. So, some of the ships I built in Space Engineers took, I think one of them took over a month and a half to build. So, and that was with me spending 4 or 5 hours every day on it. But that wasn't survival. In creative, it won't take nearly that long. So, survival is also its own entirely separate beast, something you really, really need to keep in mind. To finish this bridge module off, I'm actually going to place one of the very critical blocks that are supposed to be in here. An antenna. There will be other antennas, but this particular block, and placing it under the bridge like so, adds a very, very much essential functionality to the bridge. Now, this antenna is something I'm going to have to go in and turn off, because normally this antenna is not really going to be doing much. This antenna is the one that gets turned on in the event the ship has other forms of damage. There's other antennas that I will also be using, including the dish antenna and the laser antenna. The dish antenna is going to be the primary one. I think I'll place that closer towards the back, off to the side. So let's go around this way. And I think I'll get rid of this. And replace it with that slope. And then I'll drag that slope up. And I'll definitely even out these corners and stuff. That's, yeah. Drag that slope up until it reaches the level of that block. And use this just like to build up with. And that was a sentence. That was really, truly a horrible sentence. But basically what I'm doing is I'm drawing upward with this until the two are even with each other, regardless of what block ends up finishing it off. Which looks like it's going to end up being the larger of the two 2x1x1 slopes. That's okay. Because that will... Oops! That will give me decent amount of room to work with in this one. Alright. I can then flip this around and drag it across. Now, here's the point in which I'm starting to actually think about weight in this design. Because, yeah, I could definitely do this in full blocks, but I've already got a lot of weight elsewhere, so I'm just trying to factor in what would be a useful happy medium in here to provide not only structure, but also a seal, and give the option to make this look a little bit better. And I do not like that. Oops, wrong button. It's too steep, it's not going to blend in very well. Yeah, if I added more coming off to the side here, it'll blend in a bit better. But I'm going to have to do quite a bit of greebling on the sides to make it all blend in. But that's going to be a project for another day, as the whole exterior right now is very ugly. I'm not so prideful as to, refuse to accept the fact that things do sometimes, and quite often, look downright ugly. Let's do... I'm just playing around right now. Yeah. I guess I could just draw it up and see what all ends up working in the blending, so... Let's just go ahead and do that. Now, fair warning, a ship like this is going to cost in the millions of resources to build. Okay? So don't jump into... Actually, I would actually argue it's going to cost in the tens of millions, but... yeah, of resources to build. This ship is a big one. So if you're ever going to attempt to build a ship like this in survival, right out the gate, understand that you're going to have to spend a lot of time on the infrastructure. I haven't put any infrastructure in this ship yet, but if you were to be building and designing a ship of this scale in survival, having those support systems in place first is going to be absolutely paramount. Because otherwise you're going to have to spend all this effort and time on a portion of the build that won't actually be included in the build. And that gets discouraging. So, and now we're running into one of the things where the slope here is different enough that it's not going to quite line up. I think I'm actually wanting that. So let's go ahead and just draw this up to the appropriate height. And see what happens. See how it looks. So, because right now, this is all still part of the outer hull right now, in the areas that I'm working on right now. Yeah, there's sections of it that will be part of the pressure hull, but for the most part, this is outer hull. And these nice long expanses of 45-degree angle slope blocks do sometimes break up some of the larger, more intimidating seeming structures. So that's one of the reasons I'm putting up with it right now. Alright. Let's draw a line of blocks from here across. Anchor that in. Okay? And I can do a few things to kind of greeble with this, so let's do that. See what we can bring over. Yeah, it's a bit deep in, but that's okay. That's going to be one of those areas that I'm just going to be like, it's going to take some time. But already you can see that large flat surface is starting to break up the way this whole thing looks. So let's continue to draw these across at that same level. I think I'm just simply going to draw across. So this area is going to take a little bit more attention to get just right too, but that's to be expected. The cool thing with a ship like this is that when it does show up to a theater, most people are going to be like, running away. They're not going to want to challenge it. Not that it has the capabilities of a battleship, or that it's intended to take the role of a battleship, but just from the sheer scale of the resources that would be needed to engage it, is going to be intimidating. That is something that you can use to your advantage if you are trying to create a ship like this for actual combat in Space Engineers. So understand that most enemies that you're going to face will take one look at this and say, if he could build that, how many more ships does he have? And they're immediately going to start doing the calculations on what it's going to cost them if they fight you and they lose, or if they fight you and they take casualties. So yeah, you could certainly just show up with this thing and say, hey, I'm here to blow you up, and see how well that goes. But more likely than not, you're going to encounter those that, if you're engaging with them with a ship this size, they very likely already have something similar. So they're going to win. This ship is not meant to duke it out. I'm not designing it to be able to duke it out with a hostile force. It's meant to be mostly a very carefully measured approach ship. So the commander of it, if you are end up being the commander of a ship like this, needs to account for that, needs to plan for that, needs to be aware of that. So. That goes up there. Let's do that. Because that will allow us to now put in these along here and much more easily blend everything together. There we go. On the underside here, I'm going to add in the pieces that finish it off in this area, just because they are going to be somewhat important. But I do like the fact that it has a stair-step design on the inside, that little seam on the outside that is actually looks fairly good, and it's helping break up the whole shape here. It's less intimidating, it's less like a block, and there's this area that's just kind of like cut into it to make them line up. It is actually very visually appealing. So, sorry, I'm just drinking some of my sweet tea. It's not sweet tea, so to speak. It's just unsweetened tea that I added some sweet and low to, but yeah, it's sweet. It just doesn't have sugar in it. So, now that we've got that area done, let's work on this area. I understand if you're intimidating. I understand if you are intimidated. That is okay. That is okay. It's this one that I need. As we have kind of a tapering point here, that's going to then get blended in with this as it gets blended in on that side. So there's kind of a, yeah, it's a little awkward shape. We're going to make the most of it though, because it is actually a very useful shape for the overall design. Alright, and see, it's brought us up to just one block below where we need to be for the rest of this. So let's go ahead and continue running along the rest of this here with the other blocks that make it up, which is this one. And along here, might as well do those too. And this one needs to be rotated into position. Every time. Every single time. Here. I think I'm just going to let that slope end right there, because it's going to simply get cut off by... Come on, I need a full block. There we go. By that. Clicking around for everything except the one that I needed. And that one, see, it's reset. There we go. See, it's that extra overlap right there. It draws the whole eye away and just draws it towards something in the center here. So, yeah, it's doing what it's supposed to do. Now, to bring this up to the next layer here and get it all to blend in is going to be the next little trick. Here. I'm going to do what I can to try and preserve this straight edge. So if this lined up over here a little better, let's see. could do that. Which would mean that all that I'd need to do is find a block that could kind of complement there. And that would work. Would be kind of awkward, but it's something I've done before. And it does work. Which is actually what I just did. So, and now we've got that kind of a irregularity in it that draws the eye away from the flat surfaces. It breaks it up a little bit. And that is actually something that you do need to look into when you're building something in Space Engineers. Even though most of this is kind of going to be hidden, having the extra lines in here, the alternating angles, it will help overall with the aesthetic of the ship. So, and there's yet another reason why I'm doing this as well. Having sloped areas like this does allow for a certain amount of deflection in the game. So there is a strategic element to it as well. And since this area is going to be the primary area where a lot of the crew are, now you see the reason why there's so many different slopes. This corner, I'm not dealing with this corner today. That corner is going to take quite a bit of time. Ah, God damn it. I forgot that I turned replicate off, so I turned the mirroring off. Oh well. And when I placed the antenna. So, well, that was a stupid thing to do, but now you can see the difference between the two sides. So on the one hand, it does have a little bit of help there. It makes it seem a little bit more smooth. So I'm going to have to go ahead and fix this off camera, but you know, that's just going to be a little bit of tedium. So, with that, I think I'm going to start winding things down. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to me, or go ahead and post them in the comments. This particular ship is probably at least another 8 hours of solid work away from completion before it's ready for flight trial tests. So, even though we got quite a bit done before, and a fair bit done right now, there's still so much more that needs to be done. And in a later episode, I will be designing a drone launch system. I will be designing special weapons launchers, including the primary weapon for this ship, which is going to be a gravity cannon. So I really look forward to showing everybody how all that works. And frankly, it's going to be really quite awesome. But with that said, thank you everyone for tuning in. This has been Wolfe. I will be streaming later today, probably at about 4:30. I will be streaming my Minecraft survival world for a few hours. So, everyone, thank you for tuning in. It is much appreciated. This has been Building in Space Engineers with Wolfe. Have a good